Hello, Happy New Year. To start off 2025, I wanted to talk a little bit about this fantastic piece of literature I'm holding up. It's called Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Pachinko tells the story of a Korean family's turbulent migration to Japan. It spans 2 countries, 4 generations, and 8 decades in total. It also is subdivided into 3 different books itself. The first is Goyang, or Hometown. The second is Motherland. And the third and final book is Pachinko. Now, Pachinko is one of the best books I have read in a very long time, though I honestly expected nothing less from the author, Min Jin Lee. I read Free Fruit for Millionaires, her first novel, a couple of years ago, and I thought that was outstanding as well. I do think I like Pachinko quite a bit more, though, because Pachinko has, in my opinion, much more fleshed out characters. Not just when it comes to the main characters, but also when it comes to side characters. I think every person you read about in Pachinko seems to have their own life experiences, traumas, drives, ambitions, life goals, emotions, and just in general, they have different personalities. So I really enjoyed that about this book. Now, my style of review will be a bit different than usual. I'm no literary expert, and I did not major in English or literature or anything related to the humanities whatsoever in college, and I have honestly not written an essay of that kind since my sophomore year, so it's been quite a minute and I'm a bit rusty. So instead of trying to do a half-assed job at trying to sound smart with this book, all I wanted to do for this video is share a couple of the words I really liked and some of the passages that stood out to me in this book. The first word that I really liked is primp, which means to dress or groom oneself with meticulous or excessive attention to detail. And it is found in the following sentence. Before Sunja crossed the threshold of the kitchen door to leave the house for the market or the beach, she would check her reflection on the polished metal lid, primping the tight braid she'd made that morning. The second word I want to share with you is inure, which means to habituate something undesirable, especially by prolonged subjection. We can find it here. He had become almost inured to death. His frailty had reinforced his conviction that he must do something of consequence while he had the time. The third word I want to share with you is bereft, which means deprived of something or lacking something needed or expected. And we can find it in this passage. The chalk-marked rock they used to leave behind like a message was no longer in its crevice, and she was bereft because she would have liked to have drawn an X and left it in the hollow of the rocks to show him that she had come back and waited for him. The next word I really liked is demur, which means to voice opposition or to object. It's found in this passage. Not long ago, he'd mentioned that she should accompany him to a marvelous onsen in Kyoto, but she had demurred, saying she had to take care of her brother's meals. The next word I want to share with you is petulance, which is the quality of being childish, sulky, or bad-tempered. We can find it here. Oh, Hana, why? He had to smile, having missed even her petulance. Why are you so difficult, Hana-chan? The last word I wanted to share is actually a phrase in Japanese, and it actually has quite a bit of relevance towards the end of the story. The phrase is shoganai, which roughly translates to there's nothing we can do or it can't be helped. And it is seen in the following passage. Why can't the police make the principal? The father looked directly at him. Then, seeing Haruki's defeated expression, the father stared at the door instead. You people work together to make sure nothing ever changes. Shoganai, shoganai. That's all I ever hear. Now, here are the passages I enjoyed the most. I'm going to read them in order of appearance in the book, not really in order of how much I enjoyed them. But I like them all, so. The first one is, history has failed us, but no matter. Now, I really like history has failed us, but no matter. I think it is a fantastic opening line, and it does a phenomenal job of setting the tone for what you, as the reader, should expect from this book. And when I was doing my research for this video, looking up a little bit into Min Jin Lee and what she wanted to do with this book, I found that in an interview with Dua Lipa for her book podcast, which, by the way, did you know that Dua Lipa has a book podcast? I'll link it in the description if you're interested. She talks about how the whole point of Pachinko is to give a voice to the people who have been cast aside by history. because in history we often hear about really big, important political figures like kings, emperors, presidents, but we don't really hear all that many stories about the common people. So, on the one hand, this book is trying to correct course in that aspect, and it's trying to give a spotlight to common stories that common people, not nobility, not politicians, not super successful people, are experiencing. So that's the history has failed us part, because history does fail the people who don't really get to tell their story, or whose stories are deemed irrelevant, if you will, because they are not leaders in the traditional sense of the way. Well, and there's also the sense of, but no matter. So this part, I think, is what makes the whole thing just outstanding, in my opinion, because even though we have this, unfairness set upon the common people, there is resilience. There is a spirit of pressing forward, and regardless of the circumstances that we may be thrust upon, we're still gonna push ahead and keep going with our lives and try to make something good out of it. I think that resilience is a big theme in Pachinko, and it is perfectly captured in this opening line. I think that when you first go into the book, you kind of get that sense, but now reading it back after having finished it, it just resonates a lot more with me. So I think just an awesome quote overall. The next one is, "A woman's lot is to suffer." Now this is a very interesting quote, and I think it provokes a lot of thought, both for the characters of Pachinko and also within myself or anyone who reads this, because you both see that the women of Pachinko, being in a very misogynist society, do endure a lot of suffering, and that is a major part of the experience of being a woman. And the person who says this quote the most is Jin, and she says it to Sunja. And you get like two different views on what this means. So Jin seems to have internalized this, that she really believes this deep down to her core, that the main component of a woman's life is suffering. And then you see Sunja, who kind of pushes back against this in her own way. She does listen to her mother, and she does see the suffering, because the women of Pachinko suffer a lot, just off circumstances, from being in misogynist societies, being women in misogynist societies, and Pachinko being a pretty good portrayal of what happens. Does you find the women of Pachinko in a lot of situations where they suffer. However, while Jin's takeaway from that is that is the main experience of being a woman, I think Sunja has a bit of a different view. She also sees the suffering. It's not like she's oblivious to it or that she doesn't experience it. She suffers, right? But I think that Sunja has a bit more pushback towards this idea, and she also does not, while she sees suffering clearly as a big part of a woman's life, she doesn't see it as the central part of a woman's life. So I would say that while Jin says something like, "A woman's lot is to suffer," Sunja might think more along the lines of, a woman will suffer. Like, it's an inevitable fact of life, but there are so many other things to being a woman. You can see it in the way that she never really, when she's raising her children, she never really puts the suffering in the forefront. It's mostly something she has to endure in order to treasure her children and to give them, the best life she can in the same way that her father did for her. And you also see it when she meets Phoebe, which is Solomon's girlfriend, and she really starts to like openly question, like, oh, my mother used to say that a woman's lot is to suffer, but honestly, when she sees Phoebe, she's like, that's the last thing I want for her. So I don't know. I think it raises quite a bit of discussion, or it can raise a bit of discussion, and it's a very, very interesting little phrase to think about, because while you can take that away and you can come to that conclusion from all the bad things that happen to women just for being women in Pachinko, you also have others who don't see it that way, who sort of take something else away from the experience of being a woman, Sunja being the prime example. And I think that this is another manifestation of the history has failed us, so women must suffer, but no matter. I think the two quotes kind of go hand in hand. I don't know what you think. Now, this next passage is actually my favorite in the entire book, and it is, you have to remember that no matter what, the men who are in charge are just men, so they're not much smarter than pigs, and we eat pigs. You live with that farmer Tamaguchi who sold sweet potatoes for obscene prices to starving Japanese during a time of war. He violated wartime regulations, and I helped him, because he wanted money and I do too. He probably thinks he's a decent, respectable Japanese, or some kind of proud nationalist, don't they all? He's a terrible Japanese, but a smart businessman. I'm not a good Korean, and I'm not Japanese. I'm very good at making money. So this quote is said by Hansu to Changho. I think it just shows a lot of insight into how people behave and how people hold these sorts of contradictions in their heads. And how we will, as humans, justify anything we do. And most of the time, if we don't think about it too hard, we often come to the conclusion that we're good people, even though we're doing terrible things. And I think it not only shows that Lee is a brilliant person for even coming to this observation, but also being able to put it down so succinctly in words is just very admirable. It also makes you really question. It makes you question so many things. So when Hansu says, the men who are in charge are just men, so they're not much smarter than pigs, and we eat pigs, you really do question why is it that the people at the top are at the top? Are they really, fitting to be there? And then you like the whole reflection about Farmer Tamaguchi being a terrible Japanese but a good businessman is so interesting, because I don't know, I feel like I probably think that I'm a good person, but I may, like Farmer Tamaguchi, be also very misled and very wrong about this, just because I maybe have not thought about it enough. So it just brings a lot of self-reflection with it, which is why I think that it's one of the things that stays with me from this book, and also something that I'll probably think about for quite a long time. And yeah, there's not much to say. I just think that it's a fascinating passage. This following passage actually resonated quite a bit with me, and I felt pretty called out. So here it goes. Although, if you like everything you read, I can't take you that seriously. Perhaps you didn't think about these books long enough. So this quote like I said, made me feel very called out because I think that I am also pretty prone to liking pretty much everything that I read. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. I think that there's often something in any book or any piece of media that I'll find that I kind of hold on to. That makes me think like, oh, maybe like the whole thing wasn't all that great, but you know, it had this part. So I can relate to Noah mostly in liking most of the books that I read. But you can't help but wonder, like, is have I just not thought enough about it? Is it is that the case? So I don't know, cause it made me question like, do I really like Pachinko or have I just not thought about it long enough? I think that in the process of reading and rereading these quotes and trying to articulate my thoughts on why I think they're something that was very impactful for me when I was reading them and why they're worth sharing with you or with, myself in the future if I ever watch this video again. Um, I think I have a better sense of that, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe am I not that good of a critic? Who knows? So this will also definitely stay with me, hence why I think it's worth sharing. The last passage I'll discuss with you today is the following. Beyond the dailiness, there had been moments of shimmering beauty and some glory too, even in this Ajuma's life. Even if no one knew, it was true. So this quote specifically refers to Sunja's life. It's a reflection towards the end on Sunja's life, and I don't want to spoil anything because I don't think that would be fair to anyone who hasn't read Pachinko. But I do think that it's quite interesting, and the more I think about it, the more everything boils down to the first opening line. History has failed us, but no matter. Because Sunja lived a very ordinary life, I guess you could say. It's a very by design kind of how Lee wrote this. It's sort of a condensation of a lot of people's experience. A lot of the Zainichi, which is what they're called, Koreans living in Japan. She's just like a summary or a like a amalgamated collection of stories. She represents all these people, and despite the fact that she might not have lived anything truly out of the ordinary, really literally by construction of this book, she sees it as something that was worth it in the end, and that there were remarkable moments. And it's a bit ironic too, because it says, even if no one knew, it was true. And as a reader, you who have accompanied Sunja literally from her birth up until she becomes an old lady, like, you see her growth and you see so much. And if you've read the book, I am willing to bet that you liked the book and that you found a lot of value in Sunja's experiences. That you also see the moments of shimmering beauty and glory. So, I don't know. I just think it's really cool that you see this person who was put in very, adverse situations and circumstances by history, persevered through it, and then at the end comes to the conclusion that even if it wasn't, something that would alter the course of history, and it wasn't something that anyone would write something about. I mean, it's funny because even if no one would literally write a biography about Sunja, it was still a life worth living. And I don't know, I find some comfort in it because in today's society, I think we're all expected to stand out. We're all expected to do something big with our lives. And, I find some comfort in knowing that even if nobody, for me, speaking for myself, even if nobody else sees all the good things about my life, and that, all the little victories, or victories in general, big or small, and all the moments that I treasure, even if that never makes it into a book itself, even if that doesn't really affect anything in the bigger picture of things, that, if I can come to the same realization when I grow old, when I become an ajuma, then I would, I don't know, I guess I would like that. I feel like what I'm trying to say is that I would be content, and that is very reassuring. And I think it is something we should value a lot more in general, or that I won't speak for all of us, but I will try to value a lot more just how little it should matter that our lives are meaningful or impactful, as long as there is something there that you find beautiful or you find glorious. That's all that really matters. But yeah, that's the last quote I will discuss. Finally, I wanted to add a bonus passage, though I won't discuss it at all. I won't give you any context as to where it is in the story or what I think about it. I will just share it with you and let you guess. If you've read it and you know what this passage is talking about, I want to hear what you think. And did you also find that this little sentence stood out to you? And if you haven't read it, I want to, read your guesses. What do you think this means? What is it talking about? What is Min Jin Lee trying to say with this? Okay, without any further ado, here it goes. She sat crumpled and half awake in the corner of the expansive back seat, like a crushed butterfly. Now, before I end the video and let you go off on your merry way, I actually want to give the book a rating. For this year, 2025, I want to keep it simple, so I'll just have 3 categories. The first category is don't read it. Pretty self-explanatory, not worth your time, just don't pick it up. The second is read it once, which means it's worth something. You probably will get something out of it, but maybe it doesn't really warrant all that much deep thought. And the third category is read it more than once. So this one is for books that either I feel will get better with a reread, or books that I know will get better with a reread because I'm rereading them. And it's usually the kind of books that make you really think, and that have so many details hidden throughout the story that you can't really get to them all in your first go through. And for Pachinko specifically, I will give it a 3, which is read it more than once. I definitely think that I'll be coming back to Pachinko. I'll let some time pass so I don't have all my thoughts and opinions about the book fresh in my mind, but I do expect this book to get better every time I read it. So I think in 2026, you'll see me reviewing this book again, probably in a lot more detail. Right, well, with that said, I hope I inspired you to read Pachinko or pick it back up if you have read it already, and I will see you in the next video.